as possible. It is. Oh, thank you for starting. And to make best use of the time, we decided to use the evening and have an impromptu NSA ad hoc session for two purposes. One is for our OPD representatives who are over to my right and sitting up on the dais with us to give a training on best practices in IAD investigations, and then to also get some public feedback on what was posted earlier today and posted earlier this week, some versions of the NSA Ad Hoc memorandum, which was developed through an ad hoc to describe two things. One, the progress that the Police Commission has made in working on Task 5 and Task 45 and supporting the police department and overseeing the police department for our over the last 6 months, 5 months, as well as presenting a set of community recommendations for priorities and changes to implement to support culture change within the department. For those who are attending virtually, there is a supplemental agenda that has two versions, one that was posted on Monday and another version that was posted this morning of that ad hoc. For those of us that are joining us in person today, there are, again, two versions of this memorandum. Please pick up both. They're in different stacks. One is the one that was posted on September 11th, and then there was one that was posted this morning on September 14th. They are on the table in front of the microphone here. All right. Thoughts, questions? Why don't we make use of the time and get us started? Please take the laptop there and unmute it, introduce yourselves, and why don't you get us started?
All right, good evening. My name is Lieutenant Worcester with the Oakland Police Department. With me, who will also be presenting, is Lieutenant Skirtland, who's to my left. We've both been with the Oakland Police Department for 23 years, conducted both criminal and administrative level investigations. I'm currently the lieutenant for the division level investigations in internal affairs, which means that I see almost every investigation that comes through the entire department. And I make sure that it's not only complete for Task 5 purposes, as well as investigatively sufficient and is conducted in a fair and unbiased manner. Lieutenant Skirtland is in charge of the, he's in charge of the IAD investigative section. So he deals more often than not with more of the high profile complaints that come through. And we'll get into our presentation tonight, which is internal affairs investigations, conducting unbiased investigations.
Everyone can see this? Okay. Hit the next slide. So the Oakland Police Department's Internal Affairs Division has a mission statement. The Internal Affairs Division performs a critical function within the Oakland Police Department. Its job is to maintain the integrity and values of the OPD by conducting fair, impartial, and objective investigations of all allegations that an OPD employee has committed misconduct or that OPD policies or procedures themselves are flawed. There's an absolute right for any community member to file a complaint if they feel wronged by an employee or policy of the OPD. The complaint may be written or oral, with or without use of the official IAD complaint form, which is available on the OPD website. There is also no time limit to file a complaint. The IAD commits to handling all complaints fairly through procedures that are clear and transparent for all involved.
All right. by doing its job properly, the IAD the intent is to build trust and respect between its two constituents, and that would be the community and the police. Where a complaint leads to an officer's discipline or correction of a defective OPD policy, both the community and the police department will benefit. Reform, either narrow or far-reaching, may occur as well. Even where no actual change results from a complaint, an IAD process may give OPD insight into how it is perceived by the public and may provide an important opportunity to reach out to the community, explain policy, address bridge gaps in communications, and or at a minimum demonstrate empathy with someone who has a negative encounter with OPD. Police work often is difficult and complex. To the staff of Internal Affairs Division, OPD encourages you to assist with needing.
Can I ask you to pause for
Sure.
a moment? Apologies to those in person and on Zoom. We've gotten a report of a technical error. You all are not seeing. Let's see. Let's make sure you all see what we see. Has it changed to the mission statement? Great, awesome, thank you.
Okay, sorry for the, should I continue? Okay. OPD encourages people to assist those needing, we encourage our members to assist those needing help with heartfelt enthusiasm, knowing that we are fulfilling the mandate of internal affairs.
And just so you know, I will make sure this slide deck is on our website so folks can review
Excellent.
anything they've missed.
And that is the mission statement for internal affairs and OPD. Now we'll get more into the actual processes of conducting the an IAD investigation.
One of the first steps upon receiving a case file is the recusal process. A big reason for that is you want to avoid bias or even the perception of bias. There's a few specific points. If you're directly involved in the incident, that typically occurs if you're the sergeant on scene of patrol, for instance. There's a complaint against you, you wouldn't then come back and investigate that. Or if you were involved in a use of force, for instance, and there was a complaint of unlawful force, you wouldn't then come back and investigate your own case. You would recuse from that, and the case would be assigned to another supervisor to investigate.
I know that you all know some of the people. What does that mean in practice? They themselves off case or what?
Yes,
So
sir.
for those who may not have heard on Zoom, Commissioner Shea just asked the question, what recusal means in this particular case.
Okay, that's a very good question. And yes, to your point, what recusal means is if you're involved in the case or you have some sort of a relationship with somebody that's involved in the case, either it's a familial relationship, you're going to recuse, you'll recuse yourself from the case. What that means is you're going to return the case file to your commander that gave the case to you. You'll sign a recusal form, have a discussion with the commander to explain why you can't investigate or why you shouldn't investigate this case, because you want to make sure that the process is fair. And we don't want to have somebody that's, even if you could conceivably investigate it without allowing any bias to creep in, you wouldn't want to give that, you wouldn't want to have that as to even hang over your head or hang over the process. You want to make sure that it's as fair as possible. So if there is any type of relationship, you're going to return the case back and it'll be assigned to somebody not associated with it.
So are you saying that you want to avoid the appearance of bias, the actual bias?
We want to avoid both.
Just say what I said.
Okay. Right. So we want to avoid the appearance of bias, and we want to avoid actual bias that may be involved in the complaints.
All right, now we'll move on to the actual when you're gathering information. So investigators shall conduct a thorough fact-finding investigation. Is it updated? Okay. All right, so investigators want to conduct, we want our investigators to conduct a thorough fact-finding investigation to take recorded statements from all relevant persons, gather and preserve and examine all physical evidence and collect other information pertinent to the investigation, which may vary from investigation to investigation. The assigned investigator shall ensure that the complainant has been contacted and determine the nature, scope, and severity of the complaint, and to identify potential witnesses and or evidence. Examples of evidence would be that investigator would be expected to collect would be police reports, conduct a canvass, which would be to look for additional surveillance footage and or witnesses that need to be interviewed. They'd also collect body-worn camera, which is body-worn camera is the video that all officers are mandated to wear in the field during incidents, as well as any photographs from technicians that were taken, as well as medical records. We also look at social media and to make sure that if there's anything that covered the incident, we cover that as well. Investigators will examine the allegations and identify any potential issues. If there is evidence of possible criminal misconduct, then the investigator shall immediately make the proper notifications, and that would be to the Oakland city attorney as well as to the criminal investigations, and they would also open an investigation at that point. And then finally, after we're doing all that, we still want to make sure that we're identifying all potential witnesses. Sometimes you'll find additional subjects, and a subject in this case would be anybody who is the complaint is being made against. And then finally, you would prepare an investigative plan, pooling all of that information together so you know what direction you need to go for your investigation.
Did it move?
Did the slide change by chance, or is it still on? What is the first word you see?
It's still on the last.
Still on the last one.
We'll just have to do this every slide.
First one should be consultation.
Do you now see it say consultation? Okay. You know, I wonder, maybe if we leave it on this, if it will perhaps,
Does that show the slides coming up to them?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're able to see that?
Are you able to see now the slides on the side as well? Okay. Okay.
Okay. So after you've collected the information and you've had a chance to review it, there are you're going to create the investigative plan, which is essentially an outline of the case itself. It's going to include the allegations that are alleged. You're going to add allegations that you may have discovered during your review of body camera or other evidence. You're going to compile the list of MOR, the manual rule violations that are there. And some of our manual rule violations have to be reviewed by the Oakland City Attorney. And that consultation happens. We would send them our investigative plan, as well as our interview outlines for those cases. And there's specific MOR violations. So obedience to laws, felony or misdemeanor, obedience to laws, misdemeanor infraction, any high profile cases, for instance, cases that might make the media, that might not necessarily fit a criteria of a serious felony or misdemeanor or other serious type crime. But if it's in the media, typically we will involve the Oakland City Attorney as well. Cases that will result in immediate reassignment or administrative leave. And any allegation that a first offense would result in a potentially 30 days suspension or termination or demotion. The purpose for those, the heavier discipline type cases, being that they typically are associated with more serious allegations of misconduct, we want to make sure that we are looking at everything, not just legally, but we want to make sure that we're covering everything on those, that we don't miss something at our level, and that we have the attorneys that are associated with the city that can also help evaluate things and assist us in progressing our investigation.
Okay, so after you've done all that, you're going to start preparing for your interviews. You'll want to complete an interview outline, which is basically compiling based off of the evidence, whatever the potential allegation, whatever the allegations are for that specific investigation. You want to gear your questioning towards that, as well as covering all the pertinent policies that may be addressed in that question that you'll be asking people. We, as a habit at Internal Affairs, will take our an outline of our questions that are going to be asked, and have the Oakland City Attorney also review them and see if they see anything that we've potentially missed, and or they'll add things to it. If there's some legal questions, we'll ask that as well. We want to ensure that when we're actually doing the interviewing, that we're asking open-ended questions and not asking leading questions. That comes back into not being biased and to get an accurate recollection of the individual's recall. You want to ask probing questions that look at their true recollection of the interviewee, to gain a full understanding of the perception of the incident, as well as what they actually recall and don't recall. We want to always begin our questioning from a broader a broader stance, and then narrow that down, and we call that funneling technique, and that's what's taught to all investigators. We also want to be sure that we're covering all the alleged allegations and or alleged behaviors. This including how the alleged actions and or behaviors comport with department policy, procedures, and current law. The most important thing while you're doing these investigations, though, is to be an objective fact finder. You don't want to come into any investigation with any preconceived notions. You only want to be there to collect the facts and be evidence. All your conclusions should be fact and evidence-based conclusions. You should not be based on your personal opinion, any personal bias, any beliefs or anything. That has to be based in law, policy, training, and that. Otherwise, you run the risk of damaging the integrity of the investigation and the interview.
And continuing on that, as part of being an objective fact finder, is just everybody has their own internal biases. We try to minimize those as much as possible, because we want to make sure that our investigations are based on departmental policy, procedure, rules, law, and our training. We want to be aware of our own personal feelings, beliefs, and opinions that may interfere with our ability to avoid bias creeping into our investigations. One of the ways we do that is we have my supervisor, or if I'm reviewing another subordinate's investigation, puts another set of eyes onto the investigation to make sure that the appropriate questions are being asked, the appropriate allegations of misconduct are being addressed. And if there is some confusion or disagreement with a finding that's made, that second set of eyes can offer a different perspective, and that can address, or it could potentially help avoid having that one investigator's bias reach in an improper decision. And that's really it works especially with force cases and allegations of force, where some things can be somewhat subjective in what you're seeing or hearing. And sometimes it takes somebody that's completely unrelated to the investigation to look at it, just to get a different view for it. And again, the whole purpose is to create a fair investigation.
All right. Is the new one onto the screen yet?
Conducting interviews.
Okay. And to continue off of that, when you're actually conducting interviews, here's the steps that you're going to always do these things. You'll provide what's called a AB 301, and that's an acknowledgement of rights and obligations. And that's basically advising the subject and or witness, we provide it to both, that they're required to ask, well, at least for the sworn members or employees of the Oakland Police Department, they're required to answer our questions in a truthful manner. So it's putting them on notice that if they provide false information, we're able to determine that allegation will also be added to their into as an allegation. So that's established all there. And when we have cases where there's potential criminal misconduct allegation, they'll also be read a Liebarger, which is basically them being read their rights like anybody else, that they have the right to remain silent, have the right to have an attorney present with them while being questioned. If they refuse that, which officers generally would if they were being criminal, if there's criminal misconduct involved, then we would move from the Liebarger to what's that?
From Miranda to Liebarger.
From Miranda Liebarger, where we would require them or give them a direct order that they were to provide a statement. That's at the beginning, at the onset of the interview. We also allow the interviewee, after we've covered all of their background as well as their knowledge of policy, we would then move into allowing the interviewee to provide a summary of the incident in their own words with as much detail as possible, so that we can establish a baseline of what their true recollection is. This is before in level 1 investigations, which would be like very serious use of force investigations, probably more likely than not. Like an example would be officer involved shooting. They would not be allowed to watch their any body worn camera footage of the incident. So that's so that we can establish a true baseline of what they truly perceive, because from doing years of investigations, the officers don't always see what their body worn camera captures. It could be for a number of reasons. Their body could be in a weird position. They could be perceiving something that in one direction and the camera could go in another direction. We just want to know what their true, it's not to provide them an excuse for anything. It's just to get a baseline of what their true perception is. So that we know, so that we can better evaluate later on when we start asking more narrowly crafted questionings. That after that, then we could get into more probing questions. We don't leave an interview without obtaining responses from and addressing all the allegations in question. Oftentimes with this method, we also will discover additional potential MOR violations or manual of rules violations, and we'll add those at that time.
Excuse me, officer.
After the interviews are completed, we kind of come down to the report preparation portion. That requires you to summarize the interviews that have been obtained. Typically, the summaries should be conducted or written up in a chronological order. They should include the pertinent facts, and it's a reflection of that subject officer, that witness officer, or the complainant's statement of what they perceived and what they reported. When appropriate, direct quotations would be included. The investigator doing the case is directed not to insert their own personal opinions or their own opinions of what they thought somebody was saying. Those questions should be addressed prior to. If there's still questions at that point, that person or that subject officer could be called back in to clarify something that's discovered in a case after you've done the interview and you go back and listen to it. Sometimes you listen and you're like, I should have asked something else. You can call that person back in and address the questions that weren't maybe fleshed out enough. The statement should stand on its own, though. There shouldn't be the investigators don't add that what they perceive the interviewee to be saying. We also will summarize what we observe in body cameras and surveillance videos. So as Lieutenant Worcester mentioned a second ago, body cameras might face one direction while an officer is involved looking in a different direction, for instance. So what's observed in the body camera would be documented in the report, what can be seen, even though it might not be what is the recollection of the officer. And the reason that's done is it's about full transparency that covers both the perception of the interviewee as well as what is being recorded. And those things are all documented in pretty good, pretty detailed, pretty heavily detailed write-ups. And even with the body cameras, we use direct quotes again from those, from what we actually hear in the body camera. Sometimes witnesses don't recall what was said or don't recall what was told to them. And we can look back at the body cameras and find the direct quotes and insert those or put those into the reports as appropriate.
Commissioner Shea.
I'm waiting to see if it showed up.
Yeah,
No,
yes, sir.
just a few more slides, sorry. So after you've done all that and you've compiled, you've written up your statements from the witnesses and the subjects and the complainant. You've completed an analysis of body worn camera and or additional evidence such as surveillance footage. And you've evaluated all the evidence. You'll also complete a credibility assessment for everybody who's been interviewed. And that'll be based off of that'll be evaluated based off of their statement as compared to video footage, and just to make sure that everything comports and matches up. And that's also where we'll determine whether there's some discrepancies. Discrepancies don't necessarily, the perception of errors are basically discrepancies, doesn't always equate to someone not being credible. There could be a lot of reasons why somebody perceived an incident a certain way. It ranges from people being intoxicated to people not understanding the law or OPD policies, or like I said, officer could be looking one direction and not maybe they didn't actually see something that happened on the incident. However, we do evaluate for credibility, and if there is a lack of credibility, it should be specific only to that specific incident. We don't, if somebody has a documented history of or has a history from another case of being not credible, doesn't mean that they're necessarily not telling the truth in this incident. That doesn't generally happen with officers, because more often than not, if they are determined to be not credible, it oftentimes leads to a truthfulness allegation and then most likely termination. So we don't run into that very often with, in fact, I can't recall an incident where that's occurred with officers where they've been determined not credible, unless it's just something where they just have a poor recollection of the incident. But that's very rare, because we don't allow people to give interviews that leave in any issue open-ended. At least we try not to. We also evaluate a 910 days prior review of, and this is for OPD members, or which are sworn officers, for any allegations of misconduct and determine if there's a potential pattern there. We also evaluate discrepancies, like I said, between physical evidence and or other witness testimonies, and we compare those to consider whether in determining their level of credibility. And like I mentioned before, body-worn camera and video surveillance is also used to either confirm or refute allegations resulting in a finding, and that's for witnesses and subjects.
The disputed fact portion of your report is the part that actually breaks down what was the allegation and what did your investigation determine. So part of that is the complaint. Number one, the complainant's allegation. We don't expect a civilian or a resident to know necessarily the jargon of the law of police department. So if they're making an allegation of something, it doesn't have to match an MOR specifically. Sometimes we have to take what they're saying, try to get as much information from them and fit it appropriately to the MOR. So when we're addressing the specific fact or the allegation they make, we can reach the appropriate finding. The investigative findings utilize a preponderance of evidence standard and are not beyond reasonable doubt. What that means is, it's, to put it simply, it's more of a 51% that it happened or didn't happen, right? It doesn't, beyond reasonable doubt or is a court setting, which is very high standard. Like it's definitely more likely than not that it occurred versus a preponderance, which is just a tipping of the scales. Some other potential findings that we reach, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have sustained finding, which would be the officer's misconduct was found to have occurred and it violated our policies, and they're sustained. Not sustained would mean that we couldn't reach that preponderance. We didn't hit that at least 51% to say that it did or did not happen. And exonerated would mean that the behavior or the allegation occurred, but that it was within policy or law. And then unfounded would mean that whatever the alleged misconduct was didn't occur. Typically, those are based, I mean, with body cameras, we go back at the start of our careers when we didn't have body cameras. Those were probably easier to determine, or more likely to be found, I should say, not easier. With body cameras, it's easier to come across truly a true determination of unfounded because everything is recorded all over the place. Makes it easier. We also have an administrative closure, and the alleged misconduct either doesn't rise to the level of an MOR violation or doesn't pertain to that specific member or employee. And we'll see those sometimes because Oakland is a large city, we do have other agencies that come into the city to do investigations and that. So they'll interact with the residents of Oakland, and sometimes those residents will make a complaint of misconduct against, say, San Leandro or Piedmont. We don't investigate other agencies. We focus on the Oakland Police Department. If those are made to us, we do forward those to those departments. So, I believe that is the end of our presentation.
Conclusion of our presentation. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to take them.
I do. If could you go back to the bias part? And I was wondering if you're able to discuss different kinds of bias, like more specifics on what types of bias there are, and also even active ways to avoid it.
Well, like we said earlier, obviously everybody has their own personal biases. What we try to do in our investigations and in the review of our investigations is just be as objective as possible. Sometimes that can become challenging if, for instance, like part of the reason with the recusal process, if we have a relationship or we've worked so closely with somebody for an extended period of time, for instance, it might make it more difficult for us to look at something as focused as we probably should be. And if there's an allegation and we're looking at somebody that we've worked with, if they're a friend, or we may not be able to, it might make it much harder to come to say a sustained finding, for instance. And the same goes the other direction, where if it's a coworker that we've not gotten along with in the past, where we might look at that and go, he probably did it. And we're going to we'll let our bias sway us more to a sustained finding, but maybe that wouldn't be the appropriate factor. So with those, if we know, that's one of the reasons why we have, when you first receive that case, you're going to go through the packet, try to identify who the subject members are, identify as many of the witnesses as possible, and find out, you want to look at that and see if this is somebody that I can't make an honest opinion of one way or the other. And if that happens, it's important that we separate ourselves for it and pass it, give it back to our commander so they can find somebody, can give it a fair investigation. When we review the cases, it also affects, when we're reviewing, for instance, the a complainant statement, for instance. It's important for an investigator to look at a complainant statement and not be swayed, for instance, on this person was just arrested for a violent crime. We can't just because somebody's arrested for a violent crime, for instance, we can't let that mean that they weren't subjected to some violation of our policies. We still have to look at the officers. We're still required to treat everybody with dignity and respect. And if we have somebody that's arresting somebody and they're not meeting that level, we can't just say, well, that person's a bad violent guy. We're just going to close that one out. It has to be looked at. We can't let that bias creep in. And that's one of the reasons why, like I had suggested earlier, the second set of eyes. If you're looking at something, when we get a case, the whole process fails if we can't take a clear-eyed look at a case and recognize either we're coming at it, either we have a bias that's swaying us one way or the other. So if we recognize that within ourselves, then we know that we can't do it. We have to move it on to somebody else. Or if we're looking at something and maybe we're just not seeing it, you give it to us, get a second set of eyes, and maybe that provides a little clarity in another direction. And a lot of these cases, like in my office, it's we get some of the little bit more complicated cases, and we frequently have, an investigator come to another investigator and say, I'm having a problem with this case. Can you look at it? And they'll show the body cameras and that sort of thing. And it's just depending on what someone's work experience is, it's just better that way. I don't know how, I'm not sure how else to explain that.
I'll step in. So that's why we focus, like we mentioned before, that's why we focus on department policy, law, rules, and training. That eliminates a large portion of potential bias in and of itself when you do that. Every person on this planet has different biases based off of their unique experiences in the world and how they've interacted with people, and especially when it comes to law enforcement. And law enforcement officers are no different than members of the community. They have their own biases based off of their life experiences as well. When you start putting those personal opinions and personal feelings into investigations, that's what we strive to avoid. And that's why we have policies that are very clear for what officers can and can't do and what's expected of them, as well as that's why we have laws and how we train them. So that's what we focus on looking at. That eliminates an investigator from being upset. Well, I think that this person is a really hard worker and they're good, and so I think that's okay. That would be completely inappropriate for one of our investigations and biased. And that's not what the Oakland Police Department wants to do. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to serve the community and provide fair and unbiased investigations, so that not only can we properly serve the community, but we can build a relationship of trust and transparency with the community.
I have 3 questions. The first question is, and you might have addressed it a little bit with what you said now, but what kind of action is taken when bias is discovered in the report? What kind of action do you take?
If the bias is discovered, for instance, the first catch would be during the review process. When you've completed your report, you're going to give it to your first level supervisor. They're going to read your report. They're going to examine the evidence that you had, body cameras and that sort of thing. And if they're finding stuff that is not documented clear, or like you're saying, it shows maybe a level of bias, that report should be returned. And either there's the potential of having them say, take another look at this, let's discuss. I'm looking at this and I'm having a different opinion. If that officer, or excuse me, the sergeant that investigated that is like, this is what I think it is, the way that we address that would be that supervisor then writes an addendum to that report, disagreeing with that finding. If they believe that if that investigation reached a conclusion that the supervisor did not agree with, they could write an addendum, and then that would then be presented during the executive meeting to the chief of police. And the chief of police is always the final vote on those, so. But both versions of those, or both of those would be presented to the chief. And then the chief would be, there's significant probing questions of the investigators at that point too. To make,
And just to piggyback on that, after that process were to occur, if depending on how egregious it is, if it's something like a perception or if it's just clear bias, then that would be the investigation would have been taken away from that investigator for one, because we can't keep giving back if the person shows a clear bias, we're not going to give them back the investigation. In fact, my division does that not frequently, but we have done that. I've received investigations from the field where we review it and it's like, you can't do, we're going to take this away from you, and we're also going to provide that person training depending on what how the severity of it. I haven't run into one where it's like this person is clearly like out of control, but like they definitely have allowed their biases to interfere with their ability to conduct a fair and unbiased investigation. So it gets taken away from them. They would receive training so that hopefully we can quell that from happening in the future. If it were to continue, it would become an investigation and we would investigate that person.
Before Commissioner Howell, who is joining us tonight, asks his next question, I think it's a good time to note that the only three commissioners in the room are myself, Chair Malele, and Commissioner Howell. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, my second question is, how do you track all the changes, and do you track every modification or change?
Absolutely, we do. We track all the changes that come in the field. If it's like, I mean, I'll use like an example. My division that I run is division level investigations. It's called DLI unit. And that is all the investigations that come in from the field come after they get reviewed from their chain of command, and they'll come through my division. And we will make sure that one, the investigation is investigatively sufficient. That's part of the NSA. That's part of task 5. As well as there's no biases in the investigation. And sometimes it's poor writing in the language that's used. Sometimes it's not. But we will discuss that with the investigators and point out what we find on that. And if corrective actions need to be taken, they will. Oftentimes that comes in the form of training, removing the investigation from that person to another person. More often than not, we'll probably just keep it in internal affairs, because the people there are specifically trained to what to look for and how to address that sort of thing. You repeat I kind of got lost in my own answer.
I could piggyback on some of that, sir. We do track changes when we're submitting reports.
That's what I was going to say.
We
Keep those on a server as well. I'm sorry. Yes. We've been doing that since before. I know that's something that's kind of come up, but the DLI division has been doing that for many years. And sometimes we'll have investigations where there's maybe 1 or 2 versions. Sometimes we've had ones that there's like, it's gone back and forth, and there's like 14, 15 plus revisions. All those revisions are kept on a server. Yeah, we're not well, just for investigative purposes, we want to be able to go back and say, listen, like you did this here in this investigation. We corrected it. It was corrected here, but this is what you originally had. So we're not, it's full transparency.
So with that being said, once the chief gets the final report, does he have to request for all the changes that brought him that report, or you guys provide that? Here's the final report, and here's how we got there. How does that work?
So the chief will only read sustained findings. He doesn't read if it's an exonerated or an unfounded or an admin closure, that would go up through the captain of internal affairs. But the ones that he does read, yes, he has access to all the different changes. Yes.
And also for level 1 use of force, all of those, regardless of findings, will go to the chief of police.
And then, and you guys provide the tracking of the changes?
Absolutely.
Okay, he doesn't have to request them.
No, the chief has access to everything.
But
Like he
there-
doesn't have to ask for, he doesn't have
There's
to
a-
ask for it.
I think I'm catching Commissioner Howell's point, which there's a difference between being provided all of those prior versions and having access to those.
Oh, yeah, no,
Right.
he doesn't, he has access to them and he has provided them.
Okay,
Yes.
so here's the final report. Here's the changes to how we
Yes, sir.
arrived at the final report. Okay, all right.
Okay, let me take some sort of questions from the public, starting with the people who are here, and then turning to anyone who's on Zoom. Mrs. Sada, I think you had one. I'm gonna ask that maybe I'll bring this to you and then you ask the question.
Need to bring mine instead? Okay.
All right,
Okay,
go
it's
for it.
okay?
Yeah, go
My
for it.
first question is this: the whole process of the investigation that you just went through, is there anything in that process that was created because of the NSA?
So I've been with the Oakland Police Department since September of 2000. I've seen quite a bit of change. When I first came onto the streets, the NSA did not exist. I was not in internal affairs at that time. During the course of my career, I've watched changes occur as a result of the NSA specifically to the internal affairs process. So I would say,
Other
yeah, I
people
would say
wanna
yes.
talk, but I just want to say, the question is, yes, some of what was presented in terms of the process is a result of the NSA mandate. Is that correct? And we don't have to identify, just yes or no.
I would say,
I think that's a yes.
I would say yes.
Okay, then the second question is, with the cameras, if a citizen has camera footage, can that be submitted along with the officer's footage for review?
Absolutely. And we would require that for a complete and thorough
Okay.
investigation.
And the last question, so other people can participate, is related to the recusal process. Can a person being investigated request that an investigator recuse themselves based on they feel there's some bias? Or only can that person also ask for recusal?
I don't know that I've actually seen it happen, but yes. So correct.
Yes, it is.
And then it would be up to the IAD commander to make that determination.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other people who are here want to ask some questions? Okay, seeing none. I do see a member of the ad hoc, Mariana Contreras. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question and we'll start opening it up after that.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm not sure that was Lieutenant Worcester, but it seems like since he's been with the department since 2000, he has seen many IED investigations. In reference to internal investigations where there's cover-ups and untruthfulness, what has been your experience in terms of, supervisors not picking up on the bias, not picking up on the improper procedures, such as, making suggestions, counseling, recommendations as investigators to the the subjects. What's been your experience with that? Thank you.
Those commanders, in my experience, have been terminated. It's that simple. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but when it's discovered, it's addressed.
Mariana, does that make you complete?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I do see a number of attendees. Does anyone who's an attendee want to ask a question? Raise your hand if that's the case.
At this time, I'm not seeing any hands from attendees on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very
Thank
much for
Appreciate
the
it.
opportunity.
Appreciate the presentation and your time. Okay. I'm trying to decide between staying here or going. Just doing a bit of a location change. Hold on, please. Thank you. Okay, I have changed locations. I'm currently on the dais. Thank you, Ms. Yoon, for allowing me to borrow your laptop so that my laptop can be in the audience. I want to turn now, if we can, to the NSA memorandums, which are part of the supplemental agenda. And I hope that we can take some time to discuss a number of things, including both the general content of the NSA memorandum, sort of identify the different versions that are currently have been posted and public, as well as sort of have discussion about the priorities, the subject matter of the memorandum, as well as talk a little bit about tone and framing, as are clearly apparent from these two different memorandum. So hopefully I can start off with providing some background information, a general summary, and then it's just opening it up to first members of the ad hoc, then to members of the public who are here, and then to members of the public who are participating via Zoom. How does that sound? I can't see, so let's see. How does that sound to people? Sorry. Appreciate it. Okay, I am not hearing any strong objections, so I'm just going to trek forward. Okay. So I want to start off by taking a moment to thank the members of the NSA Ad Hoc, not just Commissioner, Chair Malele, but also former Commissioner Brenda Harpin Forte when she was there, but specifically the members of the community who participated in the ad hoc with us throughout the number of weeks and months where this process was ongoing. As we have reported out in open session, the NSA Ad Hoc has been meeting for the last 3 months, and specifically and weekly for the last 2 months, to develop a set of recommendations, priorities, specifically targeting a key issue that the court, Judge Orrick, in the negotiated settlement agreement identified, which is the problem of culture in the police department. And these are, and so what the ad hoc sought out to do over the course of these 3 months were to identify, number one, different areas where there could be some inflection, some change, some sort of implementation of some sort of process that would cause transformational culture change within the department. Then to identify 3 priorities out of that list in order to figure out what we should focus on, because there's so much to focus on, or so many things that could be focused on, and then to develop ideas around that. That is what we have hoped is part of this NSA memorandum. The memorandum itself talks about a number of things. First, a little bit of background information. Second, actions that the commission has taken since the last case management conference in April of this year. And then finally, identifying those 3 priorities or recommendations that the department can do so that we can trigger, change, whatever the it's not catalyze, but have some sort of catalyst for change within the department. The way that these recommendations are laid out are in, you'll see essentially 3 parts to each one of these recommendations. Number 1, what is the recommendation and why does it affect or change culture? Number 2, what are the concrete steps or areas where the department could make changes to its current practice, policy, or just goals, as well as 3, what sources, what experts, what resources should be leveraged in order to make those recommendations as impactful as possible, as well as effective as possible. As part of that, though, one thing that was brought up was that we need to be able to say what the culture of OPD is right now and where we want it to be. And so that is the initial section of section 3. I want to go back to where I had started, which is thanking the community members for their valuable input, their time, the discussion. I think that what we have here is in both versions of the memorandum are specifically from them and from their ideas and from their experiences in a way such that it is, these are to an extent community driven, right? And community identified and community driven. Specifically, I want to thank Mariano Contreras, Pastor Jacqueline Thompson, Deacon Reginald Lyles, Nikki Din. I also want to thank Jose Dorado. Am I missing anyone? I'm trying to think. I did mention Jose. Yeah, I did mention former Commissioner Dorado. I hope I have not missed anybody, and if I did, I am very sorry. That is not intentional. I'm just, my memory is struggling a little bit right now. And then I also want to recognize the former Commissioner Harbin Forte, yes. And I also want to recognize the members of the department who were with us during these discussions and provided very valuable information about what the department was currently doing so that we could tailor these recommendations as best as possible to not just talk about what they're doing, but what they could do better. That would be Lieutenant Brian Hubbard, Lieutenant, oh my God, why am I blinking? Sorry, Deputy Chief Wong, and Lieutenant Nicholas Kalanch. There it is. As you go through this memo, what you essentially see are 3 parts. Again, the first part is the introduction and the background. The second part is what the commission has done over the last, or since April, and recapping as much as possible. And then the third section are those community priorities for changes to some portion of OPD or recommendations as to what to implement at OPD to create that culture change. I think I've been talking for a good amount of time, and I try not to do that. Let me turn to members of the ad hoc, chair, community members, if there's anything from that initial introduction that I may have missed or that you would like to add. Mariano Contreras.
Yes, basic question. Why are there 2 versions? And where did the second version come from?
I'm sorry, I may have missed that, or I was muted here. Did anybody, Mariana, we may have missed what you said.
Yes, my question was, why are there two versions? And where did the second version come from?
Yeah, very good. So yes, the question was, why are there two versions? And where did the second version come from? Right. So the first version, which is NSA memorandum, I think it's B, was drafted over the weekend by me after our last NSA meeting, ad hoc meeting, which was on Thursday, September 7th. At the time of September 7th, it was still very much a work in progress. And so as of September 11th, is me working over the weekend to try to make the document into something that frankly was readable and made some sort of sense. Over the course of the next few days, I asked for help. And so one of the things that happened was that chair helped me with sort of going through the document, adding context, adding additional information, and sort of reframing some of the ideas so that one of the things that we were thinking about in this document is not just where are we now, but where do we go from here? And so the second version, September 3rd, the one that's labeled September 13th, reflects an intent to try to get the document to be more forward-looking. Where is this going? What is it that we want to do, and why are we doing it? It's something that I've gone over and sort of had edits to myself, and I wanted to have two versions, both versions, for people to see what exactly those changes were, what the different versions were, and to frankly have a discussion about it.
So my follow-up question is, so if Monday, the police commission special meeting would have taken place, we would have only been looking at one version? The
Yes.
version that the ad hoc by consensus agreed to present to the police commission. Is that correct?
Yes. It being that version being one that was still being worked on over the weekend, but yes.
Okay, I don't want to jump the gun here, but when it's time to make comments on the versions, I don't want to jump the gun right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the ad hoc? Okay. I think now is probably a good time. I hope that everyone has had an opportunity to go through the documents. I know that they were provided in relatively short notice, reflecting sort of the process of revision and going through the documents. I want to open it up to feedback about the documents, specifically the content, framing, the discussion about sort of what's in the document, as well as, the different versions, and sort of what version to put forth, if any, or both. I'm going to move so that I can help Mrs. Sada with the laptop that's right next to her because she has raised her hand. I should be a little bit more explicit. Actually, whoever wants to talk.
And 14.
You're right. So the shorter one,
Is the 13?
the shorter one is the one that is
The final.
the September 11th, and the longer one is the one that was September 13th.
Shorter one does a better job with it. And which one is the final? This one?
We don't have a final.
Not yet? Okay.
So
Okay.
it's weird hearing myself talk. Mrs. Sada, or opening it up to anybody who wants to provide some comments. I heard Ms. Kramer.
It all sounds good on paper. How is it gonna work out? I hope.
If I can, Ms. Kramer said that it all sounds good on paper. How is it going to work out? That's a very good question. It is not as explicit in the shorter memo, because the idea didn't come out, or I didn't think about it, and I think Chair very much helped me with it. But one of the things that is going to continue after, if there's some sort of vote or agreement on this memorandum, if it gets sent to and submitted to the court, there's going to be follow-up work after this. There's going to be a continuing conversation, meetings, whether that's within the NSA Ad Hoc, within the commission, a separate ad hoc, whatever it might be, to continue developing these recommendations in conjunction with OPD and getting them to implement these changes in a particular ways, right? And so to the extent that we can say, we hope it happens, I think it's incumbent on the commission to make sure it happens and to keep it going, regardless of what the composition of the commission is, either now, a year from now, 5 years from now.
I have one other very specific question. What happens to an officer who is unable to restructure his behavior?
Let me first repeat it and then sort of provide what my understanding of a little bit more context, and then where my expectation of the department would be, and then of course reflecting that it's my own understanding, which may or may not be correct, but what I'm thinking. So your question was, what happens to an officer who, and I'm going to put it in a more direct way, keeps screwing up, keeps screwing up and doesn't change their behavior, right? The idea is that progressive discipline, if for the screw ups that occur, will generally mean that the sanctions are more and more and more serious until they get to the point where this officer is just not going to get it, and they're either never going to do the thing that they keep screwing up, or they're going to get terminated. That's the idea behind progressive discipline. There certainly is situations where there is no progressive discipline, where an offense is immediate suspension or termination, such as what the two OPD members said here today. But I think yours was a slightly different one, which was, what if they keep screwing up in the same way? Well, that in and of itself is, I think, problematic. It means that they are not learning, not wanting to learn, refusing to learn, or refusing to change. And that's a problem, right? And so that is, I don't think any member of OPD, my view is that OPD has the same view as I do. I haven't confirmed with every single person of OPD, but that's the messaging that we're getting. We're of course going to make sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now it's my turn, because I raised my hand first, but, okay, all right. One of the outstanding points that was brought up in the ad hoc, in my opinion, is when Mr. Ryle said that it would be very important for the police department to identify themselves what has been the culture change issues that they see from their perspective. And from their perspective, what culture changes recommendations are they recommended? And I'm very disappointed that that didn't follow through, because that would have been a very important point to hear from officers directly where they see the issue of problems around culture within their department. So I'm very sorry. And I think y'all did try to push it to get it done, but it wasn't voluntarily accepted. The second thing I'm concerned about is this document is one of many. When I say many, the mayor, the city council, and I'm not sure who else has to address the culture change. And have we weighed in to see how other entities that were responsible before to go to the judge with their recommendations, the mayor and the council, to see if we have some similarities or we can bind them? Did you have to do it separately, but according to the judge? Or could it have been a collective document submitted from all people involved in the request for culture change? But I'm hoping that before we go before the judge, all parties will come together to say, this is what we've been able to say. And we could just submit one document instead of, 3 separate documents. Thank you.
Could I ask someone to help with the overall process of where the next, let's say maybe the next 2 weeks are going, but actually before that, I did see Pastor Jackie put her hand up. And I think that she has a specific comment to what Ms. Asada said, the first part of what you mentioned. Pastor Jackie.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner Shea. My comment is not necessarily directed to what we just heard. I just want to give my general sense of the idea of 2 documents. And so first, let me say it was an honor to be able to serve. I certainly appreciate our colleagues who did this hard work and meeting and discussion and all of the intensity that was involved. And my sentiment is the second document for me, the document that is dated September 13th, in my opinion, appears to dilute the original point of what we were trying to do, which is establish that we recognize the challenges that not just past challenges, but even present challenges of culture within the department. And I'm speaking specifically to the section that speaks about going forward with a brighter future. And the section that was eliminated that restated the ad hoc or community's opinion of what the current culture is. And I certainly agree with the previous commenter that the request was made of officers to kind of do a self-assessment. I'm sure that's a time issue, not sure that can still happen. But I think the challenge it presents overall is that if we are really going to achieve a brighter future, we have to be able to state plainly what we're dealing with. And so the dilution of that language says to me, it makes me question, are we really ready? It is very different. It is a very different statement to say that there is a history of this or a history of that, as opposed to this is what we're struggling with today. And so it's my hope, I don't know if these 2 documents are the 2 documents that we're dealing with, one or the other, or can there be a synthesis, or can there be a revisitation from ad hoc members? But I think it's important to keep the spirit of what we originally tried to do, as well as try and maintain the integrity of those who came to the table to do it. So thank you for acknowledging my hand, and I pray that you get the sense of my commentary.
I also see Mariano Contreras' hand go up. Let me have him, because I think he's raising his hand in sort of the same thread before I turn to Commission Counsel to explain the next 2 or the next steps in this process. Mr. Contreras.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I also, just want to express that, I was very honored to participate in this ad hoc. And, the many weeks of discussion and participation and input by the community members, I was under the impression that, the consensus that we reached last Thursday was that we agreed, to put that version forward, and, which raised and touched on the sentiment that we all felt that, this was going to be essentially a progress report, and that, we were not going to be that we are not ready to make any specific policy recommendations. I have to be honest, I have trouble with the second version. You know, when you talk about, you know, that, you know, in the last 20 years, there's been a move by the Oakland Police Department towards transformation, and that it's going, you know, on a positive road. You know, when you have the Celeste Wap rape, when you have the Pollock shooting, when you have the car chase incident, when you have the investigator, you know, paying informants to lie, when you just have, you know, all this, you know, I think that it paints disingenuous picture. And then what I have real trouble with is there's a statement in there where it says that, you know, there can be some culture reforms while, you know, we're in compliance. And I don't understand that to be true, because, you know, we're not talking about a culture regarding, you know, pranks and antics. We're talking about a culture that is, you know, based on untruthfulness and cover-ups. And so that's the culture that we're talking about. And so if that version states that you can have that and compliance at the same time, and I just totally disagree with that. That just cannot happen. So the sentiment of the second version is completely opposed, and in a different direction of the sentiment that the ad hoc was presenting through these many weeks of discussion. So I just want to go on record that, you know, I am not in favor of the second version. I think that the first version is, you know, if we're going to tweak anything, that's the one we need to tweak. You know, so thank you.
I'm not understanding, but.
Thank you for your comments. Let me turn to Commission Counsel to address Ms. Asada's question about what the process is. Are people coming together? Is there going to be a joint statement? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for the question, Ms. Asada. So essentially, you may recall in April when we joined for the first time, the commission joined for the first time the filing to the court. And in there, it issued both an addendum statement by the commission and the NSA memorandum. In there, we actually had identified the commission. When I say we, I mean the commission identified cultural and structural areas for improvements. And since the judge at the actual case management conference hearing the week after specifically asked all the parties, what will it take to change the culture of the police department? The commission decided for this round that it would deepen that memo that it wrote in April to deepen that work and engage the community on the conversation of culture change and come back to the court to answer in a much more direct and explicit way around the court's question of culture change. Now, with regards to process, it would be very much the similar legal process as last time, and that is the case management conference hearing is scheduled for the 26th of September, and the week before, being September 19th, will be the date where the court is expected for parties to file. There is never an expectation that all parties, i.e. the city, the Oakland Police Department, and plaintiffs' counsel have to jointly agree to some type of statement before it's filed. The city generally files it together, but everyone has their own respective opinions and statements. And therefore, the commission is also reflecting its own opinion and thoughts around it. Nevertheless, your statement is very apropos in terms of it's an opportunity for all the parties, nevertheless, in the near future, to come together and have a more collective understanding of culture change. Surely the city with the police department has been a part of our NSA Ad Hoc, so that has already been there. But in terms of plaintiffs' counsel, you know, that could be a conversation for latter. But as you can imagine, Tuesday's filing is next week. And so I don't think there would be logistically an opportunity for that conversation, but nevertheless, it's something that the commission could take into consideration. Yes, ma'am.
So everyone can hear you.
It sounded like you said the police department independently is submitting to the judge a report on culture change that they have determined, or did I misunderstand?
Thank you so much
you?
for asking that to allow me to clarify. The police department and plaintiff's counsel is specifically talking about the NSA and the tasks, the 52 tasks, and therefore the remaining tasks that the court had provided. I think there's about 6 or 7 remaining tasks that need to be addressed. And so the city attorney's office representing the police department will be filing to specifically talk about each of those tasks. So the filing for the court is very much focused on the NSA and the task, not necessarily a big picture question on culture change. It could be as a part of it, but not necessarily. Their focus is very much the task at hand, literally.
So also to directly answer your question, which is, no, the police department won't submit their own. It's going to be the city doing it for them.
Oh, got it,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you. And I just want to say, I want to support the police commission, whatever you decide, because we're going through a lot right now. And so I do not want to challenge at this point. I just want you guys to be able, you've done a lot of hard work. And so I'm comfortable with either one of these. And I don't have to read it. I just need you guys to be respected a little bit more. I'm tired of the disrespect.
Ms. Kramer. Go.
It doesn't need to be an impediment, but it needs, the fact needs to be recognized that the police are not all wrong.
You're right.
They have a very difficult job to do as professionals when they do it well. And part of that is that they have kind of a conflicting role that they play. If an officer stops somebody for going through a red light, let's say, he's going to have to, one, protect himself and deal with the ire of the driver, okay? On the other hand, he also has a dual role of being a protector of the community. So he's a friend. And to my way of thinking, both of those are necessary roles for that officer to carry out. And somehow that kind of dialogue needs to take place between the officer and the community. The community needs to get rid of its anger or get rid of its dismissal of the effectiveness of the police force. But they need to understand why a good officer does what he does when they give input into this discussion. And that can be done. I mean, it's called trust. It has to be done. But I think the way this was written, it was like the police are the bad guys. Well, yeah, they are to some people, and we need to deal with that. That's what this is about. But some of them are really good guys.
I just have to respond to that.
Yeah.
I can accept everything you said, except the community needs to get rid of anger. I don't think you have angry people. You've had violated people.
with some officers.
Yes,
And so it's not about anger. It's about people who have been violated either physically, verbally, or whatever. And because of that, they are seeking justice. But it's not about an emotion of anger for a lot of folks. But it's people who have been, and I've been one of those people.
Traumatized.
It's traumatized, but it's also disrespected. And it creates a fear. Whenever I see an officer in the mirror, you know what I'm talking about? You kind of panic, is he gonna stop me? And then, of course, my sons always worried if they're gonna get stopped by police officers. So the thing about anger, there's so much more to it than that. And I respect your feelings on it, but I just had to share that with you, please.
I hear what you're saying. I can't dispute it because that's where you're coming from.
No,
I
that's
hear-
my personal
I hear- no, I
experience,
hear-
yeah. And I don't want to hold up, we're getting off subject. Go ahead, Mr.
You're right.
We'll talk about it later.
Do it later.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll take this opportunity to open it up to the people who are on Zoom. I do see a number of hands. Could I ask our chief of staff to allow those people to speak and to give their thoughts and input?
Thank you, Commissioner Shea.
Right here.
So
Oh,
first in
yes.
the queue will be phone number ending 1779.
Yes, this is Mary Dale. And on a general level, I've been concerned about some members of the commission who talk about, getting out of the NSA and putting the commission more in charge or whatever. Getting out means, in my opinion, working with the other city parties who are defendants. And of course, the commission is not because a party, because the NSA predated the commission by like 15 years. But, it's just, it's concerning to me that attitude is still there. There is a particular passage in at least the draft report that I've seen that is factually inaccurate and sort of self-aggrandizing for the commission. And that passage says that at the April status conference, Judge Orrick said he wanted, the remaining compliance to be more community-centered. The judge said instead that, the focus and what it is going to be on all of the parties, and including the commission, identifying steps, sustainable steps that will change the culture. And doesn't mean like turning, to a community-driven compliance process. On the positive side, there are parts of your recommendations that talk about changing, the outlook about accountability, the training, presenting training programs that will change sort of the orientation of officers and the cultural values of the department. And I think those are really strong. But I think it's a really poor move to have that up front in the report, basically misquoting the judge and mischaracterizing the steps that were, the place that everybody is in, including the other parties, relative to reaching sustainable compliance. And it's just not helpful. And then the other thing I think the commission, maybe and at some point the judge will be wanting as we get closer to the end of this sustainable compliance period, is the commission demonstrating that it's ready to handle its part of the investigative work and particularly if the investigative work is going to include some of the work that Internal Affairs is doing today. And part of it is staffing, part of it is the budget, but also having the CPRA have procedures. I mean, IAD's procedures have been changed so much because of the NSA, because of, you know, the monitor and the plaintiff's counsel, and a lot of the reforms that we're seeing today in terms of limiting, racially biased discretionary stops, requiring that the officers activate their body cameras. Those are like 10-year, 12-year, 15-year fights. And the commission, I think, needs to show a little bit more respect for the fact that the progress that has been made in the process and by the department and by the city administration is due to that, to that pressure, and show a greater understanding of the amount of, people talk about Warshaw's fees or how long it's lasted, it's time to get out or whatever. Well, the reason that it's taken so long is there has been cultural resistance, and most recently evidenced by the Instagram scandal, which included a lot of posts by disgruntled officers over just about every NSA reform, from body cameras to limits on use of force. So, those are my concerns. But the micro one is that introductory, it's like halfway down the first page where the judge basically is misquoted. It's like he's not saying, oh, culture change is having a more civil, community focused process, whether it's on culture change, whether it's on internal investigations. No, he wants to see culture change steps, whether it's from the department, whether it's recommendations from the commission, and it has nothing to do with community focused. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Next is Jose Dorado.
Yes, thank you. I just want to echo briefly the comments that have been made prior to now. Pastor Jackie talking about how this is diluting the second version, diluting the message of the community. I certainly agree with that, and it's damaging the integrity of the community members of the ad hoc. And Mariano's comments about that our consensus with this, so this was to be a progress report and with no specific recommendations. And certainly I echo Mary Vale's comment about that the whatever progress there's been over the 20 years of the NSA has been in the face of cultural resistance. 2 steps forward and many times in specific instances, one big step back. So that has to be acknowledged, as she said. But the one of the big things that really has struck me is the one on page 2, the paragraph on page 2, and I can understand how this second version was put together with the help of the chair, Malele. Let me read this paragraph. A reflection on the court's question on culture change and efforts to make improvements on OPD culture does not necessarily mean that we believe the city is out of compliance with the NSA. Both can exist at the same time, changing the culture of OPD and being in compliance with the NSA. Compliance with NSA is the minimum, the floor. I sent Commissioner Shea a copy of the video from the Police Commission meeting of October 13th, 2022. And at hour 15, there's a series of statements from Jim Channon under, I believe, was item 5, update from Jim Channon on the NSA. And what he said was that the city, and mind you, at this point, it had become clear to everyone on the police commission that there was 2 ongoing investigations. And Mr. Channon's remarks reflected the fact that the city argued that those ongoing investigations should basically be ignored by the court in terms of deferring item 5, or I should say task 5, and there should continue to be a movement toward sustainability. And his comment continued, Jim Channon's comment continued, saying, well, that's not who I am, and that's not who John Burris is. We are not going to say that OPD is in compliance when they are not. And they agreed with the monitor that task 5 should be deferred, and it was, for the simple fact that those 2 investigations were just the beginning of the investigations that ultimately resulted in the firing of Chief Armstrong, and justifiably so. But it reflects the thought in this paragraph that I cited, that OPD culture does not necessarily mean that we believe the city is out of compliance with the NSA. The instances of those improvements that must be made in OPD culture demonstrate, highlight, exaggerate the fact that the city is out of compliance with the NSA. You cannot have culture change at the same time as you have compliance. No more than you could have these 2 investigations back in 2022 be ignored, so that task 5 cannot be deferred, and that sustainability can be continued. That's a contradiction, and that provision should be struck totally and completely. Thank you.
So I would like to clarify for the record, I did not write that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment, former Commissioner Dorado. I don't see any other hands at this time.
Let me take a moment and ask for a little bit of discussion on a particular point, which is, I think that on the one hand, well, right now I see sort of 2 things. I see some acknowledgement that OPD has done something. OPD has tried to do something, has made changes. And that part of that, where that stems from, whether it's OPD internally or the external pressures of the negotiated settlement agreement, the lawsuits, protests, the police commission, or members of the community, OPD has made changes. I also see on the flip side, bad things are still happening. Bad things are still happening. Is there space in this memorandum for both of those things? I'm just going to open it up completely to whoever wants to talk. I will prioritize members of the ad hoc, members who are present community members who are present in person, and then go to Zoom. Mariano Contreras.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Shea. Version 1, we stated that that we should recognize both misconduct that promotes untruthfulness and cover-ups, but that we should also highlight the actions of proper actions by officers. You know, that is not specific to, you know, from 2003 to now, but it's very specific and day-to-day actions of police officers. So I think that that statement, although it sounds general, is not. It's stating that, you know, we recognize the proper actions and proper conduct of officers. You know, so I think that that is in version 1. And, you know, we spent a good amount of time talking about that. So I think that addresses, you know, the question of, you know, is there room for both those things? Thank you.
I see 2 hands in the chat. Could I ask Chief of Staff to take those?
Absolutely. First in the queue is Risa Jaffe.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I have not participated or listened in on all the ad hocs, but I did listen in on some. And I heard some really strong things coming from the community. And so it's concerning to me to hear community members expressing concern on version 2. And I hope their concerns will be taken strongly. Because what is the purpose of this memo? I mean, we've been doing the NSA for 2 decades, and it's going to take some strong, direct language to get culture change. So if that's what's required in this memo, I support that happening. If people need a pat on the back, we're not going to get culture change. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Jaffe. Next in the queue is phone number ending 1779, Mary Bell.
This is Mary Vale again. What needs to be submitted next week? I mean, they call it the joint party statement, and of course the commission's not a party. And that's going to be the respective, and they don't all agree with each other. It's a sort of a cumulative party statement, and they each make their case about the issues before the court. And now that the judge, of course, seeing the transitions that are coming, has, you know, invited the commission to participate in the hearings, including filing its own statement by the deadline, so it'll be included in before everybody at the hearing. I really don't think that it is productive to say, you know, on the one hand, there are problems, and on the other hand, like OPD has done some good. OPD, with the assistance of the city attorney, they're going to make their case about what they've accomplished since the last hearing, and what on the specific issue of steps towards sustainable steps towards culture change, they're going to make their case. As I said before, it's not precisely before the judge at the hearing, but obviously there's going to be, after the NSA wraps up, there's going to be local oversight, and the police commission is going to have a role that in some part embodies the work that the NSA process and the monitoring team has been done. And I think the less, you know, the propaganda statements, the better. They need to go out of the report. We need to resolve either the discrepancies in the 2 drafts, or allow there to be a minority report. The concern I have about what's in the second draft and having 2 reports, you know, a minority report coming from the ad hoc, is it kind of tells the judge that the commission and its constituency and stakeholders community or organizational are not all on the same page, and that there's some instability. So hopefully that can be worked out. And I totally second a lot of the concerns raised by Mrs. Sada and by Mariano Contreras and the other members, community members of the ad hoc. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I see no other hands at this time.
Okay. I thank you. God, that's weird hearing myself speak. Pastor Jackie.
Good evening again, Commissioner Shea. I will need to leave, and so I just wanted to certainly thank you for the opportunity to be on this call and express our concerns. I look forward to how this will be resolved between the deadline date. And also just want to reiterate that the first step to culture change is an honest acknowledgement of where the culture stands. And so I want to make sure that that's heard. And then also echo the sentiment that there within both of the drafts, but specifically the first draft, there was a very clear statement about commitment to the well-being, the mental health, and Mariano, you can correct me, and physical health of officers. And so this is in response to the statement or the suggestion that somehow the community is at odds. That's not what this is about at all. We understand the stress of the job and committed to officers that are healthy so they can present their best selves and interact in a positive fashion with the community. So I want to make sure that that is present in that first draft. And again, however it comes about, if there needs to be a third draft, I look forward to that, but I will need to leave. So I didn't want to just drop off the line. Thank you.
Thank you for your message. Thank you. I want to take our final moments to ask a very specific question. I appreciate all of the things that have been said so far, and I've got a lot of work ahead of me, I think, but I also want to ask, this document not only reflects this document reflects many things, and one of the things that it reflects are 3 specific priorities that have been identified by community members by this ad hoc as things for the commission and also the department to focus on in working on culture change. I'm hoping we can have some discussion, especially among those who haven't had the opportunity before, to talk about whether those are the right ones, or there's other ones that should be focused on, and have your thoughts, or if there are other suggestions that people may have. I see, looking around the room in the council chamber, I'm not seeing anything yet, but why don't we take Mr. Dorado, who has his hand up in the chat.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Dorado.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make a final comment because I'm going to have to sign off as well. On page 3 at the top, there's also a statement that may well have been written by Chair Malele. And it goes, it's worth noting that the information gap the commission faced earlier this year hindered our ability to carry out our functions and responsibilities in a timely and effective manner. That I would strongly suggest also be struck because it's simply not true. Again, going back to the October 13, 2022 Police Commission meeting and the report by Jim Channon on the NSA, it was very clear that the 2 investigations were ongoing. He said specifically that there are people that know about these investigations. And it was very clear to me in the way he framed that it was incumbent upon the police commission to look into this, and they didn't. And obviously that led to ultimately down the road, the firing of Chief Armstrong. and the commission saying, oh, the mayor jumped the gun. Well, the mayor did not jump the gun. This October 2022 meeting of the police commission was a very clear indication of that there was something going on that should have been looked into. It was not. So it cannot be said later on, oh, gee, the firing of Lauren Armstrong was the mayor jumping the gun. This was months down the road. So that statement should be struck as well. Thank you.
Once again, I need to clarify that was not me. Thank you.
Yeah, that was me. Any other comments or thoughts around the priorities that have been chosen? Whether those are the right ones, whether there should be different ones, whether there should be additional things in those recommendations. This is not, oh, I think there's still opportunity to discuss and to work on these. We do now have a commission meeting that is currently scheduled for Monday, September 18th, where the topic of the NSA will be part of the closed session and that this memorandum will be part of the open session. Hopefully on that particular day, we have a quorum and that we can have much more discussion about all of the things that have been brought up today, as well as what I anticipate is going to be a lot of work for me over the weekend. So thank you all. Thank you all for taking the time, for going through a training with us and waiting until the end so that we could have a discussion. Looking around the room for any last words. Okay.
Yeah, I want to echo your sentiments. This was a nice discussion. It was nice that people were able to speak for as long as they needed to. And I appreciated all of the comments. So thank you everyone who came. And actually see one more hand.
You chair, Ms. Beck, whenever you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to check if there is a time set for Monday's meeting.
Since we're having a closed session, generally that means 5:30 to start the meeting, enter closed session. How long it will take to get to open session. I think today we had thought it might be around 7:30. I am not the final arbiter of that, but I would anticipate something like that. Good question. Thank you all. Have a good night. Be safe.